So, like I said, we're going to be talking about persuasive interviewing today. And you guys are on Zoom, or feel free to like speak up or chip in whenever. I might ask some questions or some rhetorical questions, but feel free to say whatever if you have a thought. I do not mind, or you can type it in chat, whatever works. But how many of us have ever been in like a sales position? So if we've been in sales, we've probably done persuasive interviewing of some form, because we have to find out what people need to be able to sell them something, right? But one of the first things we have to ask ourselves before we try to sell things to people or persuade them of anything is what we're doing ethical. So is it the right thing to do, or is it a good thing to do? So ethical is just focusing on the value judgments concerning of what is right or wrong. And then what are our ethical obligations in human contact? And yes, people do have slightly different ethical and moral codes, but as a whole, there's typically more universal ones that we can agree on. Like if we know that Madison doesn't have any money in her bank account, we're not going to try to sell her, you know, a $300 pair of shoes, because that's not ethical. We know she can't afford it. You know, if you know one of your friends is struggling financially, you're not going to try to persuade them to join your essential oil business or any other MLM or anything like that, because that's not ethical. But those are just kind of typical ones that we think of when we think of as persuading. So persuasion deals a lot with, you know, money, getting people to buy things, or even getting people to try to vote a certain way. So one of the things to ask yourself is what's what I'm looking for? How susceptible do you think you are to persuasion? Do you think you're very susceptible or not very susceptible? And that's just one of those things you have to think about. But I'm going to tell you that honestly, it depends on what they're trying to persuade you about. If it's something that you already kind of agree with, then it's easier to persuade you. But if it's something that you don't agree with at all, it's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to persuade you on that. If it's something you don't really care about or don't have an opinion on, but you might agree, like, or just like the person who's talking to you, then you might be kind of persuaded. So, but it depends on the context. But when you are going in to persuade people, you have to be ethical. And if you had me for public speaking, we've talked about this. So you need to be honest. So you can't lie and be ethical at the same time. You can't be deceptive and be ethical at the same time. You have to be fair. And you have to be skeptical. So you have to look at all sides of an issue. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, I like this person better, so I'm not even going to consider the other side. You have to be skeptical of what you believe to a certain extent so that you can get the most amount of information possible and eventually find the best answer or the best solution to the problem that you're having. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be deliberate. You have to be open-minded, and you have to be responsive. And a lot of those things tie into each other. You know, if you're skeptical, you might be being more open-minded because you're trying to find all the different parts that would fit best into the solution. And if you're being responsive, then, you know, you might be looking for solutions and being really good about interacting with people and saying, hey, here's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Stuff like that. Okay. So your criteria for a success in persuasive interviews. So when you're trying to persuade someone to do something, that we're going to look at the interviewer side right now, is your proposal or your solution, you know, it either does or it appears to address the need, their desires, or their motives. Or it might even create a need in someone. So, you know, we've all watched advertising, right? You know, I don't want to talk about the political ads because I've seen like 40 million of them on YouTube in the past, you know, 6 months. But if we think about just watching TV and see a, let's say just say like a Pampers diaper ad, there is definitely a need there that they are addressing. It's like you don't want like a stinky baby because then the baby is upset and sad, so you buy diapers to fix that issue relatively quickly and relatively painlessly. And if they're like, oh, it's not going to leak, so you don't have to worry about, you know, your baby making a mess everywhere on the floor because the diaper didn't hold. Your proposal and you as a persuader appear to be consistent. Hopefully you actually are, but with persuasion, most of it is appearance. So how does it look rather than how it actually is, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, if you're selling stuff and good at it. But how much does your proposal and yourself appear to be consistent with the other person's values, beliefs, and attitudes? So if someone comes up to my door and is trying to, you know, sell me something, we don't really have any more door-to-door like vacuum salesmen or anything. But if the person who's trying to sell it to me seems to be consistent with my values, my beliefs, or my attitudes, then I am more likely to be persuaded. So if you've done missionary work, you know this because it's easier to persuade people and to talk to them who seem to be consistent with, you know, what you and them already kind of believe, if you have that common ground. So like if you look more alike, or if you talk more alike, or if you have similar attitudes or belief about how the world was formed or what the meaning of life is, etc. Another one is your proposal appears to be actually feasible. So it's doable, it's reasonable, you could actually carry this out. It's practical. So like I said, it's pretty easy to get done, or it's affordable. So it doesn't cost very much money, or it's within a price range. So like if someone comes to your house trying to sell you a home security system, you know, if it's not affordable, if it's not practical and like easy to put in, then you're probably not going to do it no matter how much you want it, right? So it has to be feasible. So it has to be doable. So if you want a home security system, it might not be feasible to put it in an apartment, especially if they have to go in through the walls. It might not be practical if it's like a, you know, 2-foot long camera that weighs 75 pounds to put up in a corner. That's not practical. And if it costs like $6,000, it's probably not affordable. And then the advantages appear to outweigh its disadvantages. So is the advantage of having a home security system more than the disadvantages? Probably, but you have to do that cost-benefit analysis of how big are the cameras? You know, how much is it going to cost me? How much is the work going to cost to put these holes in the wall to run the lines? Thank you. And then if there isn't any better course of action available, you know, it may not be a great solution that this person is proposing, but it might be the best solution. It may not be ideal. You may not even like it, but if it's the better alternative than something that's going to be super, super, super crappy, then you'll probably end up going with that one because, you know, it may not be ideal to have, you know, a $6,000 security system, but if you live in a neighborhood where there's been a lot of property crime, there might not be a better solution available, especially if that's the cheapest in the area. So, make sense so far? Okay. But to persuade people, we have to know who we're talking to, right? I can't just walk up to, who's in here? Brian, I think I saw earlier. I can't just walk up to Brian and be like, hey, I'm going to sell you this thing, buy it. Because he's probably going to be like, no, like, why do I need it? I have to know who I'm talking to in order to persuade them to do anything in any way, shape, or form, right? So some of the things I need to know are like personal characteristics. I'm probably not going to try to sell a retirement package to someone who's 18 years old because that's that doesn't match up with the age. I'm probably not going to sell a sports car to a 90-year-old. Probably doesn't really match up. So just things to take into consideration: age, gender, race, size, like body size, their health, if they have any physical or mental disabilities, their fitness level, how they look, and their intelligence level. So like their education. Because I'm going to have to use a different persuasion technique on someone who has a PhD in insert whatever here versus someone who has a high school education or associates or bachelor's or insert whatever here or no education. Just because they've been exposed to different things. And if someone has gone through 8 years of college, they've probably taken classes on persuasion and communication and know how to look and see and be like, hey, you're persuading me and I'm not going to buy this thing, versus someone who's never experienced any of that before, who may be a quote unquote easier target. Persuasion's fun because it sounds really, really manipulative, but it doesn't have to be. Because if you're doing it ethically, there isn't anything wrong with that. It just gets into the bad thing when people aren't using it ethically and are trying to sell you, you know, $200 security systems or security cameras for $3,000 or whatever, and, you know, jacking up the price or making promises that they can't actually keep. So different cultural backgrounds can affect the interview, because that, you know, culture affects how people perceive you and how you present yourself. But if you're trying to sell security systems in a culture that doesn't really deal with property crime, it's probably not going to go well, because they're like, why would we need that? Like, people just don't do that. Values, beliefs, attitudes are a big thing. If you have a core value and a core belief that people are good and that they're not going to come rob your house, you're probably not going to buy a security system anyways. And then emotions. Humans are typically very emotional creatures. And if you hit us in the emotions, we tend to lose our ability to think quite as logically. So then we are more easy to persuade. Hence why they do like the commercials of like, oh, in the arms of the angels with like the sad little puppies and stuff. So we give money to the ASPCA. Or they do like the fear of missing out thing, the FOMO. It's like, oh, this deal won't last, blah, 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 because it incites emotion in us. And when we get emotional, we want to go out and do that thing to calm that emotion down. Like, we don't want to feel bad about hungry puppies, so we want to give money to say, okay, well, now they're not going to be hungry anymore. We don't want to miss out on, you know, getting that new car or truck, so we go out and buy one. And then we be like, okay, we've calmed that anxiety down now that we're not going to miss out on this deal. Spoiler alert, those deals always come around. Like, if anyone ever tries to convince you on that, it's like, oh, this thing won't last or whatever, that's how demand works. There will always be more. Like you see with seasonal candy and stuff, it's like, oh, I really want to get all these cute little like pumpkin shaped Reese's. They're going to be there next year. I don't need to buy like 7 bags of pumpkin shaped Reese's. All those Halloween candy deals. And then what kind of situation or atmosphere is this interview going to take place? So if I'm going to buy a car, it's probably going to be on the car lot. That's what the atmosphere is going to be. We're probably going to be outside. If it's in Arizona in the summer, it's going to be hot. Everyone's going to be probably a little irritated. I'm probably going to want to take one of those nice ice cold water bottles out to whoever's standing out there looking at cars. Start off with my gesture of goodwill. And then I'm going to say, hey, any of these catch your eye? Do you want to maybe move inside and talk about one of those and get into the air conditioning? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Physical setting. If I have an office in there, I'm going to take them into my office because it's private. People don't like to talk about money out in public. So they don't ask you, it's like, okay, well, how much do you want to put down in the middle of the foyer, right? They take you into their little office and say, okay, well, what kind of budget are we looking at? You know, how much you want to put down? Is this being financed? Are you paying cash? What? And then what are the outside forces that are acting on this situation? So maybe someone has a spouse and it's like, no, this is our budget. That person's an outside force acting on that. Are there any institutions that are acting on these outside forces? Do you have a boss or a company that's telling it's like, hey, you need to make these sales goals? You know, you have to sell 5 cars this month or here's the consequence. So if you are going to try to sell someone something or persuade them of anything, it doesn't have to be sales. Those are just the best examples of it. You want to be the most informed person on that topic in that situation. So you're probably not going to be successful in upselling a car mechanic on something that they know they don't need, because they're an expert in that. They've worked on cars for however long. And if you're trying to say, oh, well, you need, you know, a transmission flush and a new carburetor, and I'm just literally naming things inside of vehicles, don't ask me. And they're like, one, I flushed a transmission like 3 months ago, got it all fixed, I don't need that. It's not gonna work. But if you do that with someone like me, who is not an expert, I'm probably just gonna be like, sounds good, I guess. Like, honestly, and people take advantage of it. But if you are trying to persuade, then you need to be the most authoritative person in that situation on that topic. So you need to do your research. Like I hammer in a lot of my other classes, I don't know if I hammered it very much in here, but you need to have sources. You need to know where your information came from. You have to have the facts, and you know how to present them. You need to know how to present them in a way that makes sense to other people and to yourself. So if I'm trying to persuade someone to vote for XYZ candidate for student council or whatever, I need to know about all of the candidates. I need to know about their platforms. I need to be able to say, okay, well, Madison is running on this platform. Here's what she believes. Here's, you know, what she says she's going to do. You know, Taya's running on this platform. This is what she says she's going to do. So on and so forth. You know, these students say that they like this about this candidate. You know, last year when Madison was treasurer, she helped, you know, earn the clubs an extra, you know, $3,000 through grants or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So vote for Madison because, you know, of all the students love her and she helped the clubs earn more money, you know, and she'll do just a great job or whatever. But your evidence can be, you know, examples. It can be statistics. So if we say that, you know, if we compared how much money that Madison raised being treasurer last year versus how much Taya raised being treasurer 2 years ago, you know, we can say, okay, well, which one will help the student council keep a better budget based on how well they handled the money, you know, a couple years ago. If we're looking at, if we're trying to sell computers, we'll want to know the differences between the different types of computers and say, okay, well, this one has, you know, a 2 terabyte solid state drive. And this one has, you know, a 1 terabyte hard drive with a second 1 terabyte solid state drive elsewhere. What does that actually mean? Non-computer people probably just like, they're both 2 terabytes. Computer people will be like, oh no, the solid state drive is going to be faster to boot up and blah, 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 blah. You can collect statements from acknowledged authorities or other acknowledged experts as testimonials. So maybe previous student council presidents would say, oh yeah, you know, when, you know, this candidate worked under me, they were really, really great at this, and I think they'd make a great president. And since I was president, I can say that, or whatever. You can compare and contrast between situations. So this person might be a really good student council president in this type of situation, but the other one might be better in different situations. Or if you're just going to be using general processing, this computer is going to be really good. But if you're going to be streaming and gaming and posting to Twitch or whatever, you want this computer and this microphone and blah, blah, blah. So you need to really know, you need to know your stuff, and you need to know who you're talking to are the two big things to think of first. So who are you talking to and what are you talking to them about? And why are you talking to them? So what is your purpose? So what is your goal? Like if you're persuading people, you're not going to persuade everyone 100% of the time. It doesn't work like that. You know, I can sit here till I'm blue in the face telling you to go, you know, vote for whoever for student council president, or that you need to buy Nikes over Adidas, or that you want a Ford over a Chevy. It's probably not gonna work. So what is your realistic goal? Maybe it's just to give information and to gauge their interest. So if we're, you know, in realty and we're trying to sell a house, you know, our goal can't be to sell a house to the first person who goes through it, because that's not realistic. So our goal for each of those persuasive interviews might be to say, okay, well, what kind of house is this particular person or family looking for? Okay, well, Brian wants a, you know, 2-bedroom, 2-bath minimum because, you know, of whatever. Maybe he wants an office. So I want to get the information about what kind of house he wants, what kind of square footage. You know, is it just going to be him living here, or is there going to be other people? You know, what kind of room does there need to be for pets? So your goal might just be knowledge gathering / research. You know, your goal at the end might be like, okay, well, I want them, my goal is to have, you know, 50% of people send me a follow-up email on, you know, whatever, or 50% of people follow up with doing this. And then don't assume just after a single interview that the person is not interested or won't change their mind. Because, you know, as humans, new information comes in all the time, right? We're always changing our minds about things, because if new information presents itself, we should change our mind if necessary. So, you know, if Brian goes to look at this house and maybe it wasn't quite exactly what he was looking for originally, and he seems kind of lukewarm to it at the beginning, you know, he might change his mind and be like, you know what, you know, on second thought, after visiting it a second or third time, I actually really like this and I want to buy this house, even though it's, you know, 2-bedroom and 1.5 bath rather than 2-bath. So people can and will change their mind. And just be patient. No one likes a pushy seller, right? No one likes pushy sellers. Like, I'm sure most of us have been getting all those like phone calls and like political ads in the mail, right? Like I got a phone call last night. They're like, who did you vote for? We saw that you early voted. It's like, that's creepy, but yes, I did. What did you vote for on like Prop 207 and Prop 208, you know? Or getting texts from your political party and be like, hey, you know, go out and tell 3 friends to vote today, blah, 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 blah. So don't be pushy, be patient. If someone says they'll get back to you and they don't, just give it time, and you can always send a follow-up email a couple days later and say, hey, we talked the other day. Here's some of the notes that I took from the meeting. Like, are you still interested in pursuing this? If you are, please feel free to contact me back and let me know, you know, how things are going. And if not, thank you for your time. So makes sense so far. Persuasion is just really, really hard to do in general, because yes, people change their mind, but we're also really stubborn about a lot of topics. Like you know, if Madison is brand loyal to Nike or whatever, are you wearing Nikes? Yeah, okay. So if Madison's brand loyal to Nike because she just really loves Nike and that's the only shoes she's ever really bought in, I'm probably not going to convince her to change over to like Pumas or Adidas or something unless I have a really, really good reason. You know, or unless she tries it one day because she borrows a pair of her friend's shoes and she's like, man, these are nice. But just me telling her that she should change over to Adidas is probably not going to change her mind. So if you are one of the type of people who likes to be really organized, and with persuasive interviewing, you kind of have to be, that's why typically like in sales jobs and stuff, they give you a script to follow. So if you've ever worked anywhere where you're doing sales, they a lot of the time say, here is exactly what you say to people. You say, hi, my name is Kylie. Welcome to Best Buy. What can I help you with? Okay, you're looking for a mouse. What kind of mouse do you need? Okay, here's our gaming mouses. Here's our general computing mouses. Here's our drafting and design stuff. But know how to establish the need in people or the desire if necessary, or at least get the information out of them of what their need is. Because if they're coming to you, they probably already have a need and they know it and they want to solve it and they're thinking, okay, well, this person can help me with that. But if you are trying to sell to them, you have to come up with a list of reasons about why they should invest in your thing or purchase your thing or vote for your candidate, right? So you need to have multiple reasons as to why. So if I'm running a bed and breakfast, dream goal, by the way, and I'm trying to persuade people to come by, if I'm running an advertising campaign, I have to get my list of reasons about why they should come visit my bed and breakfast rather than, you know, Sally's down the road. So I can't just say, well, you know, one reason, well, I'm nice. Okay, great. You need a decent list and say, okay, well, compared to, you know, Sally's bed and breakfast, I'm $20 cheaper a night. You know, I have breakfast options rather than just sending out a continental stuff, and I will cook for you if you want. Here are my reviews and testimonials on Yelp or TripAdvisor or whatever. I have a degree in hospitality versus Sally does not. You know, insert whatever here about why they should come visit your bed and breakfast rather than someone else's. You can't just rely on the single one. So some of your main points that you might put down to try to lead the person into accepting your proposition. You can argue it from different ways. So you could argue it from accepted belief, so maybe something that they already kind of know or believe or already assume. And it's just like, yeah, you're reaffirming that to an extent. Two choices, well, you got this choice or this choice, and this choice is obviously better. You know, I try to use like facts, and I try to use logos in more of my arguments because I think it's more fair personally. But if you think of it as base, all of these would probably fit in ethos, pathos, or logos. So logos being logic, like facts, cause and effects, as long as you have data to back it up. You have pathos, which is emotion. So that could be this accepted belief, could be condition, could be analogy. And then what's the one I left off? Ethos, like character and credibility, which could be, you know, if you have someone giving like a testimonial or whatever. I don't want to talk about those. Yeah. That's actually probably where we're going to end it for today, at least for the strategies. And I don't know, I guess I might just skip over the strategies and talk about those later. But yeah, we'll just skip over that and go on to this, and then we can talk about that later. So when you're persuading, obviously you have to open it somehow. You don't just walk up and be like, here, buy this thing. I mean, the people in the mall might do that with like the perfume and stuff, but probably not the best idea. So tailor your opening to this particular person at this particular time and place in this situation. So if I'm at a car lot and Madison is coming in to buy a car, you know, I'm going to probably watch her from the window for a bit and see what kind of things that she's looking at. If I'm at the Ford, is she going over to the Ford F-150s, the Ford Focuses, the Ford Fusions, the Ford Escapes? What is she mainly looking at? And I'm going to say, okay, she's looking at the Ford Escapes. So I'm going to ask her if she's looking for more of an SUV type thing. You know, it's hot outside, so I'm going to take her a water. Or maybe it's not hot, so, you know, if she, you know, based on what we talk about when I invite her in, I'm going to make sure to see if she wants water or whatever. So, you know, she looks a little bit younger. So is she, you know, maybe is this her first car? So how do I deal with that? So design your opening to gain attention, create interest, establish rapport, and provide orientation. So basically all the things we do unconsciously, you just really have to focus and say, okay, how am I going to get her attention if she's on the car lot, you know, without startling her? I don't want to walk up behind her and make her jump 3 feet in the air, right? How am I going to get her interested in buying a car from me at this particular time? How am I going to establish good rapport with her to make sure that if she doesn't buy a car today, that she keeps me in mind for when she comes back? I can still tell you, when I went to look at a car at Ford, the salesperson was Chip. And I know that because we established rapport, because he's from Kansas. He's from a similar place in Kansas where I'm from. And, you know, you just get that information through talking, saying, okay, well, where are you from? Oh, you're from this area. Or, oh, you're from Kansas. Me too. Oh, you're from Pittsburgh. I'm from literally 20 miles down the road or whatever. So, and then provide that orientation to motivate this other person to take an active part in this effort. So that's like the taking them for a test drive. They are taking an active role in this. It's like, hey, you want to take out this Ford Escape for a test drive? Let's see how it rides. You know, we'll take it around town. They are actively helping you sell them that car because they're sitting behind the wheel. They're thinking, oh, this is nice. Or, you know, there's not a lot of road noise. Or maybe it's like, maybe this isn't for me because I'm not really comfortable and it's a little too high or it's a little too low. There's a lot of road noise. It doesn't have Bluetooth or a moonroof or whatever. So let's try one that does have those features. And then you kind of convince yourself into it, honestly. Don't rush. Don't take too long because, you know, people's time is valuable. You don't want to rush them through and make them feel like, oh, they just wanted to sell me a car and get me out of there. But also don't just keep on blabbering on and whatever, because they're like, you know, I might have to get back to work. I got to get home and make dinner. You know, what? Just take cues from body language about what's appropriate. And then, of course, keep the person involved. So if you're trying to convince them to vote for your candidate for student council or whatever, ask them questions about, okay, well, what kind of candidate would you like to see in student council? Oh, well, my candidate, you know, whoever this is, they fit that description because they've done these things, or this is how they embody that. So, making sense? Okay. What time is it? 35? We might get to slide 15 or so. Yeah, so we'll just do 14 and 15. We'll do these last two slides and then we'll wrap it up for the day. Okay, so as we're conducting the interview, their need or desire, you know, you don't just hit them with it all at once, right? Because that's a little overwhelming. So you do it one kind of point at a time. So we talked about up here about kind of planning out some of our main points about why they, you know, why they should purchase this thing or, you know, do this thing that we want them to do. We're not just going to put them down and give them a list that says, hey, here's 15 reasons why you should buy from me, because that's not best practice. So you have to kind of slowly introduce them. And that's part of the, you know, asking questions. So getting them involved, and, you know, if they say something that relates to your point, you'd be like, oh yeah, well, you know, the Ford Escape has, you know, really good towing power. So if you're planning on moving to a new house soon or whatever, or getting married or insert whatever here, then you'll be able to, you know, tow that little U-Haul like you'll need. So, and encouraging interaction and involvement. The more people talk, the more information you get out of them. And it's, in some situations, you can have too much information, or people can definitely go TMI, and you're like, I don't care about your marriage problems, Susan. But it's not gonna probably hurt to have too much information if you're trying to persuade people to do something. Because it's just more things that you know about them that you can tailor specifically to them. And say, you know, maybe someone's having a bad marriage, and it's like, hey, if you need to get out of there, this car can tow a U-Haul, and, you know, so I guess that would work. But probably would be distasteful to do something like that. Okay. And then questions, this is, like I said, this is probably where we'll end it after this. Just be really good about asking questions. I mean, and this is just kind of like a general life skill. Ask good questions. So, what kind of need do they have? Is there some type of need that they maybe haven't even realized that they have yet? So, what kind of questions are you asking them to get the information you need? So if someone's really set on, let's say, getting an SUV, they want 4-wheel drive, they want high clearance, they want this whole laundry list of things. Ask questions. Okay, well, what specifically do you like about having the high clearance? It's like, well, I want to be able to go up to the mountain and, you know, get all the way up to Riggs and not have to worry about, you know, scraping the bottom half of my car. Okay, that's pretty important. You probably want high clearance. You know, 4-wheel drive. Yeah, if you're heading up the mountain a lot, then you probably want 4-wheel drive. But this other stuff, you know, what are some things, are they really that important to you? So if we had to rank these, what would you rank as number 1? Okay, 4-wheel drive, high clearance. Do you want like high clearance like in an Escalade, or do you want like high clearances in like a RAV4? Because that'll depend. Or, you know, how many people are you putting in your car at one time? You know, because maybe someone really, really wants a little Mazda coupe, but if they have 3 or 4 kids, you know, unless that's just specifically their car and they're not hauling their kids, you know, they might need something different than the little coupe, right? Just encourage interaction, get them to talk, double check with verification questions. So this is what you are saying, correct? Kind of a way to think about that, just double check. Agreement or objection. So double check on the things they agree with you on, and then if they have any objections, ask them why. So, okay, well, what's your objection to voting for this candidate? Oh, okay, I understand. Here's my thought or my opinion on that as to why that is, you know, maybe less of a concern than you think it is, but you'd probably put it more diplomatically than that. Okay, so any questions, comments, or concerns? Nope. Does this all, like, I know this was just kind of a start, I went through it pretty quickly, but does it kind of make sense? Like, persuasion is hard. Persuading people is extremely difficult, and it's really hard to do well. So you just have to get the most amount of information that you can, and then find ways to appeal to that specific person, either through logic, through credibility, or through emotion. So, and that's really the gist of it. I mean, there's lots of other stuff in here to talk about. Obviously, like there's 38 slides for this one. But, you know, persuasion is difficult. I'll probably finish this out on Wednesday, but